Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Cruxall, Regional Director from the Marketing Centre, who's one of the hosts of today's webinar. I'd like to welcome you to the East Midlands Business Growth webinar. These webinars are part of a series of events that have transitioned from physical events. Pre-lockdown, we held them in a hotel in Leicester. So unfortunately today, you don't get the free coffee and the breakfast that you would get at the physical event. Instead, you get the lights of Zoom. So just be careful when you're on mute, and also be careful with those kitten filters at the moment. I just want to remind you that you are being recorded on this webinar, just something I want to point out. We do intend to hold more events later in the year. Obviously, as soon as we can get back to physical events, the better, but let's wait and see on that. So we couldn't hold these events without the support of our partners. So I'm going to quickly introduce each of the partners and briefly explain a little more about what they do. So first of all, RSM. RSM specialise in restructuring and advising financially distressed businesses and also provide family wealth tax planning and compliance. The FD Centre. The FD Centre helps entrepreneurial and owner-managed business owners live their lives they choose, providing with the numbers that rarely matter now and in the future. They achieve this with part-time purpose-driven finance directors who bring large company skills and experience into the SME market. Mattioli Woods. Mattioli Woods is a leading provider of wealth management and employee benefit services with multiple offices across the UK. Freeman Clark. Freeman Clark worked with a range of businesses from startup to 350 million turnover, adding value to their team of highly experienced IT directors. HSBC. The East Midlands HSBC team support over 3,500 businesses with their banking, funding and growth needs in the region. People Puzzles. People Puzzles provide part-time HR directors to ambitious mid-tier businesses and help them deliver the fullest potential from the people they employ. And finally, the Marketing Centre. We provide flexible access to proven part-time marketing directors across the UK. But that's enough about us. Let me welcome today's speaker, Ailey Erner. Ailey is the UK's first licensed scaling-up coach, an investor and entrepreneur. She has 25 years experience of building businesses and 15 years plus of coaching scale-ups. She has helped multiple clients exit their businesses and achieve financial freedom. Hayley has won global awards for her coaching and is a previous winner of the IOD Business Advisor of the Year. I'm also told she's a champion horse rider. I'm sure you'll find the webinar very enlightening and informative. So over to you, Hayley.
Rob, thank you very much and welcome everybody. First of all, I'm sure like you, we all prefer in-person events, but it's as it is and we have to make the most of it. So thank goodness for Zoom, whoever created Zoom. So, I partner with the guys that are sponsoring today because as running a scale up or running any successful business means you need the right partners. And, I work with my clients, with these guys, and I can only say I really do recommend them highly. So just a word of warning, I am going to be fire hosing you today. It's going to be fast paced. I'm going to be skimming the surface of a lot of things. So please hold on tight, make loads of notes, but please know that I will be sending you a recording, or you will be getting a recording of this after the event. You'll get a copy of the slide deck. I'll also be sending you some of the tools from the Scaling Up Toolkit. And if you haven't already had it, there is the self-diagnostic assessment. I'm also going to ask you for forgiveness if you find any typos. I lost this presentation, had to rebuild it, so didn't have a chance to have it checked. So please feel free to give me any feedback in the chat if there's a mistake on any of the slides. So apologies in advance. So yeah, thank you already for that intro, Rob. As you said, yes, my other passion is riding horses. Sadly, due to COVID, our competition season has been affected, but that's just the way it is. So my background, very briefly, is owner-managed business, went into my family business from leaving school. We were running at the time the UK's most successful independent diamond jewelers in the country. We had we had 12 salesmen on the road covering UK, England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And we manufactured, we retailed, we sold direct to the high street, independent, and it was a big business. And as such, it gave me a really good grounding that really helps the work that I do today. So my background is not corporate, it's all owner managed. And, you know, I became a coach back in, God, when was it now? 2006. Yeah, it'd have been 2006. And I became a coach because I actually hired a coach, because as can happen with a lot of family businesses, the transition or the succession plan was pretty non-existent. So when it came to me taking over from my dad, the plan was basically there was no plan. So I hired a coach. He was a coach from a franchise called Action Coach. You may well have come across them. I bought into the franchise. I did 7 years with the franchise. I was one of their leading performers, and it's definitely what I was put on this planet to do. I'd gone into my family's business because I didn't really know what else to do, and just found my passion, and it really is. So it's more than just a job to me. It is my own business. Whilst when I left Action Coach, which was a 7-year franchise deal, I then moved on to join Vern Harnish. And the thing is, I saw Vern at a conference. Ironically, it was at one of Action Coach's global conferences. And he was on stage and he was talking about, at the time, his book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And some of the things that really resonated with me was the fact that he talked about routine setting you free and about organizational alignment. And they were all things that, as I was working with, you know, bigger clients, I was finding that the Action Coach toolkit just wasn't robust enough, kind of didn't hang the whole thing together. So I talked with Vern, and he talked about the fact that he was looking for coaches in the UK. So I became one of his first coaches and joined his team, went to America, did some training, came back and hit the ground running, working with the Scaling Up Toolkit. And all I can say to you is that it is one of the robust frameworks that you could wish for in a scaling company. You know, part of being within the Scaling Up network means that I personally get to study twice a year very deeply with many great thought leaders on scaling companies. So it's always keeping current and relevant. That's important for you to know. So at the heart of our toolkit, the heart of the Scaling Up Toolkit, is the one-page strategic plan. It's one of the most powerful tools because whilst it is a single page, it's not so much what's on the page that counts, it's the thinking that goes behind it. And to support the one-page plan is a set of tools that are split into the 4 decisions. You know, this is called the 4 critical business decisions. And essentially, it's the 4 areas of decisions that you have to make as a business leader. And, you know, all I can say is this really does work. You know, I've supported, as Rob said, I've supported many people achieve financial freedom, but I've supported even more people to take their business beyond where they thought was originally possible. And, you know, much of that is down to, you know, the coaching, the support, helping them develop as leaders so that rather than being at the center of the business the whole time, as I'm sure you know how it is, you know, some of you are at different stages of growth, but there's a stage in growth where you just feel you're absolutely in the middle of everything and just wish you had a team that, you know, could take some more of the support from you. So, you know, these are the brutal facts, and you know I'm not sure exactly where they come from, but I certainly see this myself. Is there's like, you know, there's the saying, isn't there, glass ceilings or you hit the brick wall. Basically, most companies don't grow beyond $1 million. You know, that's the fact. And then, you know, I would say the next point is probably 5 million, and the one beyond that is 10 million. So what I've found the Scaling Up Toolkit is able to do, it's to help you understand, like, what are the tools, what are the changes need to be made to help you grow beyond those barriers that you have. And, you know, lastly, very few grow beyond 50 million. And, you know, Richard Branson has a saying that, you know, if you can learn to run one business, you can run any businesses because the principles are the same. And what I'm going to talk to you about today basically is a whole set of principles. And they're principles that are what I call real best practice. You know, will you hear anything mind-blowing that you've never heard before? Possibly not. Might you hear it in a slightly different way? I really hope so. Because I love some of Einstein's sayings. You know, we can't solve the problems we have today with the same thinking that created it. So as I share my thoughts with you, one of the things I really hope for you by the end of this is you have a little more insight maybe to why your current situation is as it is. And also, most importantly, maybe shift your perspective and shift your thinking in some areas around your business. And finally, whilst sadly we just haven't got time, you know, I said I'm going to fire hose you, and I really am. You know, I've probably got 90 days worth of content that I've scrunched into 90 minutes, which ideally would have had a day over, but it's as it is. So one of the things I would really appreciate, we're going to run some polls during the session, just to help me understand, you know, what your experience is. They're going to be very quick fire. So I'd really appreciate if you would actually answer the polls. It gives, you know, it gives me personally a bit of a pulse about what's going on. So I want you just to imagine for a minute, talking about shifting your thinking, that you are a Formula One racing team. This is your business, this is your product, and you are the driver. And, you know, one of the keys to winning in anything in life, as I see it, is where your mindset is. It's like, what's your appetite to win? What's your ambition to win? Because that determines everything from the start point. And, you know, looking back a year ago before this became our reality, you know, I wonder how your mindset was different. Like, how has COVID affected your mindset? I know that some of you have boomed during COVID. And, you know, it's not just COVID, let's dare to mention Brexit as well. I know that's affected some of you. And, you know, some of you have been well affected by COVID. It's caused a massive growth spurt for you, and others haven't been. So the first question I want to ask you, which is going to be followed by a poll, is, are you playing to win, or are you playing not to lose? So just think about that. Are you playing the aggressive game? Are you playing to win, or are you playing a little defensively, or are you somewhere in the middle? Thank you very much for joining in here. Just give it another minute or two. And yeah, I appreciate honesty. Okay, great. Let's move on from there. So that's interesting, isn't it? Nearly kind of, you know, not quite 80-20, but 50-50 split between playing to win and somewhere in the middle. So again, this is about mindset. You know, it's about whether you have that winning mindset or whether you don't. Now, that winning mindset can be developed. It can be cultivated. And the reality is, those people who achieve extraordinary things are in a tiny minority, because most of the world, most of us, we stay in our comfort zone. You know, we talk about, you know, growth being on the other side of our comfort zone, but I just wonder sometimes how much people really embrace this. How much do you really embrace this? You know, how much do you purposefully, I don't mean when things happen to you, but how much do you purposefully get out of your comfort zone? You know, when do you make those changes? You know, COVID hit last year, and it hit me real hard because I had a lot of clients that were in really wrong industries. And in the last 12 months, man, have I got out of my comfort zone and pivoted. I've actually changed probably 60% of my client base. So just want you to think about this. Are you embracing change? Are you pushing for change? Because, you know, one of the keys to being successful is the ability to make really, really great decisions. So it's all about your decisions. Every day, knowingly or unknowingly, you are making decisions. And the more conscious that you can be of those decisions, the better. And you're probably thinking, why am I looking at a slide with 5 frogs? Well, the point is that there is a little tale behind this. So there are 5 frogs sitting on a log, and one of the frogs decided to jump. And you might want to put this in chat. How many frogs do you think are left sitting on the log because one frog decided to jump? Okay, thank you. So quite a few. So the answer is actually 5. And the reason for that is, and thank you, Pippa or Pip. The reason for that is he only decided to jump. He didn't actually jump. And there's a moral to this tale. And that is, I often see in business that there is a real confusion between the difference of deciding and doing. And the challenge is, in most growth companies, there's too much reaction. There's too much reacting to what's going on in the present moment. And therefore, there isn't the time to plan the action because the decision hasn't been made far enough in advance. So I really want, if that's the only one thing you take from today, is make sure that you decide earlier, that you make your decisions earlier. You know, and these are the 4 areas of decision. You know, get your people right, it's happy days. Get your strategy right, you'll get a fantastic aligned business with good top line growth, with good margins, you'll sell at good margins. Get your execution right, you'll retain the high margin that you sold at, and you'll have happy customers because you'll be able to deliver consistently. And get everything right, and you'll have heaps of self-generated cash to fund your growth. So first decision is the people decision. And I put this first. So you're behind your wheel now, you're ready to go off round the track. What do you need? You need an amazing team. And let's go back to the question I asked you earlier about, are you playing to win or are you playing to lose? Because here's the question. If getting the right team around you, and I call it an A-player team, if that is probably the #1 key to your success, because you could argue that if you get the right people, all the other things would come right. You'd have the right strategy, you'd have the right execution, and you'd have enough cash because you'd have the right people on your team. So if you was to think about the size of your ambition, how's that going to like mirror itself in terms of the people that you're likely to attract? You know, someone once said to me, you get the people you deserve. And it was somebody who used to complain to his dad about, like, you can't find great people, you know, it's so hard, and you know, people are just, you know, just not great at their jobs. And his dad said to him, his dad was a very successful business leader, said, you know what, my son, you get the people you deserve. So, you know, it was tough for him to hear, but it kind of showed him the mirror that he needed to see to be able to change things about himself. So one of the questions that I always ask a new client is this one here. So how many of your people, including yourself, would you enthusiastically rehire? And I caveat that about also in the seat that they're in, because it might be a right person, but they might be in a wrong job. So really think about that. And I encourage you actually to go home and literally make a list. To say go home, you probably already are at home, forgive that one. I encourage you to go down and look at all the people in your organization and get your you know, start with your team and then cascade it down. Just ask that question. And I'm going to say this to you. If there is any pause, I'm going to say, make that a no for now. And it's a yes, no, straight from the gut. So, because for me, you need to be surrounded by A players, and A players are the people who do a great job. They don't take a load of management time. And I define them as like they're in the top 10% of the talent that's available or that's going to apply to fit the culture that you have in your company, and they have the experience to do the job. And, you know, I think that's important. And this is just my view. But as you scale a company and you're growing quick, you know, often I see people who see leaders who really appreciate giving people that opportunity to step into a more senior position. And whilst I'm 100% behind that as a great thing to do, the challenge sometimes is that if that person isn't ready to take that next leap with you, then that can cause you problems. So as I go through the people decision with you, just consider also that players, they work for great companies and they work for great leaders, and they're interviewing you as much as actually you're interviewing them. And some of the things that they're looking for is like, where are we going as a business? Because again, you know, think about the Formula One racing driver. You know, I'm sure Lewis Hamilton has got people queuing up to be on his team, right? Because he seems to be a great guy. He's very ambitious, and I'm sure that he's been able to attract the best people because he had a very, very clear vision of what he was looking to achieve. So first point of call again with my clients is, let's get this written down. And there's a great book called Vivid Vision by Cameron Herod, I think he's called. And it gives you a framework in which to document a vision that's fit for sharing and clear. And your people need that. And your job as the leader is to constantly be inspiring people and reminding them where you're going. The next thing is, you know, next question is, how are you winning the hearts and minds of your people? Because people, especially today, people like to do work of meaning, you know, and it's very easy to focus on what you actually do rather than why what you do really matters. And, you know, the way to think about this is, you know, it might not be so obvious. You know, I was talking to somebody the other day. In fact, they were supposed to be here today and they couldn't make it. But he was saying that the reason they exist as a company is to eliminate infections in hospitals. Now, that's a heck of a goal, isn't it? That's a heck of a reason why to run a company. But it keeps his people focused, and, you know, it wins their hearts and minds, and, you know, helps them be inspired every day when they come to work. So whilst it might not be as obvious as that for you, you know, doing that work with your people and getting outside of, you know, it's very easy to get internally focused in a business. I'm sure you know this. You know, you just see what's in front of you. But actually, if you step outside of yourself and think about actually the people that we serve every day as a company, like, what difference are we making in their lives? So, you know, on the one-page strategic plan, which you can see behind me, there's a large version of it. There's a little box for core purpose. And within that core purpose is why what you do really matters. And, you know, there are some people who cynically think this is the fluffy stuff. Personally, the last 10 years have shown me actually this is the hardcore stuff, as is culture. You know, and I've mentioned these vision, you know, vision. And when I say vision, by the way, I don't mean a vision statement or a mission statement that's a thing on the wall that has no real emotional connection. I'm talking about a thing where you time travel people forward and say, this is where we're going. This is what the business is going to look like, feel like. These are going to be our people. These are going to be our customers. And this is going to be our culture. And, you know, I have to say, from inside of my industry, this is one of, I think, you know, sometimes the most poorly done thing. The way that I like to see core values is they need to be core. They need to exist already. There needs to be enough of it happening. If not, it's what I call aspirational. Now, there's nothing wrong with having the occasional aspirational value, but one thing's for sure, if you haven't got somebody on your leadership team who is driving a new value through the business, who is passionate about those behaviors, and who will literally be the standard bearer to hold people to account, it will end up being, you know, people look at it and go, really? And, you know, I think you've probably worked for companies or seen companies where their company values really are just wallpaper. They're slogans, like there's slogans on the wall. And your culture should truly, truly represent your personality. You know, there's some things, you know, that what I would call table stakes, so what I call expected behaviors, but they need to be attached to your values. And, you know, once you've stated your values, and you know, if any of you are thinking here, do you know what, either I haven't got them or maybe they need revisiting. And I know some of you on the call are working with me and you're doing some work around this, is that your values need to guide the behaviors you expect of your people. So, you know, first of all, that means you need to kind of list them, but you need to involve everybody. This needs to be a co-creation process, because once it's there, and I recommend you take your time and you don't cast it in stone until you're really happy with it, that it's going to inform who you hire, who you fire, and how people make decisions. You know, the right culture should cut down a heap of management time. So that's kind of overview of where you need to be able to really attract A players. So when you get one in front of you, well, first of all, you'll get more candidates actually approaching you, because they will be able to see and feel this through the communications you put out there. But also, they're going to take a job with you. So it's the next quick poll here is, do you think you are attracting enough A-player talent to take you to your 3-year vision, or is it causing you a bottleneck? So there we have got about 80% of the 85% who participated. It's interesting, that 80-20 rule, isn't it? So 20% roughly feel that no, this is not going to be an issue. 80% of you think potentially, partly it is, or potentially, or a definite yes. So this is something where, you know, I'm going to say the war of talent is on, you know. Can we get rid of that? No, I'll just get rid of that. Okay, that's grand. Oh, no. I don't know, Pip, whether you can get rid of the polls once we've...
Yes, I'm doing it, don't worry.
Oh, that's super great. You know me, with just so you know, guys, I had a bit of a technology issue before we started here, so yeah, I'm not 100% sure how this is working. It's still on my screen. It can go right. We're done. Super. So you might want to think now about what the work is that needs to be done to make sure you are attractive enough to that A talent. You know, think about it. You know, Google, those companies, they have no problem attracting that talent. And particularly if you're in the tech industry, you know, the war for talent in the tech industry is absolutely rife. So you kind of, you know, the days of, you know, choosing who works for you are now really over, and people choose who they work for. So particularly at leadership level, you know, when it comes to the top of your business, your number one job, as I see it, as the leader, is to make sure you have a player leadership team. And if you're on the leadership team, your job is to make sure that you demand of the rest of your team to be A players, because if not, how are you all going to succeed together? So in a normal way of running a business would be to build an organizational chart. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, because you absolutely should. We just prefer to look at it slightly differently. And we prefer to look at it at the beginning point as functions. And the reason for that is, and I see it quite a lot, I've seen it literally yesterday. I was just working with somebody, somebody's been working with me probably about a month now. And they started to hire more people without really thinking how it worked across functions. And, you know, one of the biggest investments in a company, in your company, is your wages bill. And you know that. So I like to look at this on, if you're going to pay a bunch of people to do work within a function, then let's make sure that we've got accountability around that function. Let's make sure that we can measure return on investment. Now, I'm going to send you a copy of this, but essentially, and I want you to do this later, this is called our functional accountability chart, or the face. It's the face of your business. So here's the exercise. Column 1, first column is Name the person right now who is accountable for that function. Number 2, and although it's column 4, I like you to do this as a second thing. I want you to take your financial statements and I want you to assign a person to each item line. And then from that, I want you to look at your functions and decide what should be the KPIs that you would choose to measure the return on investment that you are getting from that function. And the third thing is, if those are the results that you want, what would be the leading indicators to know that that function was doing a great job? So an example might be the results you want from sales might be, an amount of monthly recurring revenue. It might be number of orders. It might, pound sign value of orders. And a leading indicator might be sales pipeline that could close this year. So it's about getting the results, and it's about, being able to give people accountability for results, and also being able to have that forward view as a leadership team that you are on track, that the future's looking good, so that it's like you're driving your car, you're not just looking, results are looking through the rear view mirror, whereas the leading indicators are what's going to give you a line of sight as you look forward. And the faster you grow, the more important it is to be able to have that forward line of sight and have your finger on the pulse. Because once you've done that, there's 4 questions to ask yourself. Number 1 is, do we have more than one person in one seat? And if so, can that person do both jobs? Number 2, do we have a person in, do we have more than one person in one seat? That means if 2 people own it, nobody owns it. The second question, person in too many seats, was what I just referred to, is, do they have the capacity to be able to deliver the results for both functions? Third question is, do we have any empty seats? Because if we do, they are going to create a problem. And number 4 is, do we really have the right people? Like, is there a wrong person anywhere? And what I mean by a wrong person is, A, from a culture fit perspective, and also B, has this person, and these are important questions to ask yourself. It's not just looking back of them being the right people, it's looking forwards. Like, has the person got the capability, like the talent? Have they got the desire, the hunger? Do they really know what the future, the next 3 years looks like in that role? So there's another poll coming up now. And based on what you've just learned there is, are all your functions like clearly defined, and are they owned by A players? And this is not your organizational chart. This is seeing it as a functional level. And, do you believe that you've got people with the capability to take you to your 3-year targets and goals? We've got a mix going on here. 64%, some, not all. 14%, yes. Okay, great. 29%, possibly not. Okay, so again, these are all things that become opportunities for you. This is staggering, but approximately 50% of all hires are actually mishires. And I say that again, or bad hires, and I say that against a benchmark of an A player. And let's remember that A player is that person that goes and delivers you results. They take your problem away. They don't bring you problems. And, it's a tough one, because that costs you a lot of money. And I think most companies, I remember someone once saying to me many years ago when I was running my own business about, I think the cost of a mishire was like 10 times their salary. And I was like, nah, you're kidding me. And I couldn't get my head around it. Well, I absolutely 100% do get my head around it now. And I think, some of you will already know and feel the pain. But, I did a survey. It was about 7 or 8 years ago with a client I was working with. They had a 3 million turnover IT business. And I asked them this question: what do you estimate is the total cost of your hiring mistakes over the last 3 years prior to us working together. And that included, you know, not being able to hire somebody in time, keeping the wrong people on because they needed somebody in the seat, you know, hiring wrong people. It was kind of a whole mix of things. So they went away and they came back about a month later with this figure. And it even shocked me. They reckoned over 3 years that, you know, that was the cost of the mishires. There was the lost opportunity. There was severance pay that had to pay people because they'd left them there too long. And when they did have to say bye-bye, they had all the problems. You know, they trained people who weren't the right fit, interruption to team, and all the rest of it. So it's not good. And what I thought I'd do was just to identify, as I see it, the 3 main mistakes that get made that are actually possibly costing you, you know, some of that pain. And the first one is it's throwing more people at the problem and treating the symptom rather than treating the cause. So how often has a manager come to you and said, can't meet these numbers, there's too much work to be done and we just need another person? So what do? You say, okay, fine. And all you actually end up doing is throwing another person at the problem. So, because if you think about your business as a football team, and I put your local team in here, a football pitch has a number of positions, and the last thing a football team would ever do would be to send a second person on in the same position. I mean, it would just be an absolute nonsense, wouldn't it? And, you know, they don't do that because it's against the rules, apart from anything else. But the challenge is in your company, you have no rules like that. You have no rules to guide you. So that lack of rules actually allows you to not really diagnose what the problem is. And as I see it, often it's the lack of performance and the lack of results isn't always about, and often isn't about, the fact that, you know, there is really more resource needed. Quite often it's a result of either the wrong people already in that function, or you know, and that can be resulting because the hiring manager is mishiring. They haven't had enough training in how to recruit. The person or the people in the jobs haven't had enough training. They're not really even clear on the job. You know, they don't really know what they're meant to be doing, or there isn't the process in place. You know, one of those I see a lot of is hiring a salesperson, but there's no clear sales methodology, no clear way that you're meant to sell this, no clear sales process. And, you know, salespeople fail, people who've been successful in other environments. So, you know, and also lack of visible performance measures. So you actually don't know where the problem is. So that's the first thing I'm going to say to you. Next time you start to think about throwing another person at a problem, just really dive into it and see what's underneath it, because all you're going to do is make the problem bigger by adding another person if that's not the solution. The second thing is, you know, and great sports teams, you know this, great sports teams, they build what's called a virtual bench. And in the companies that I work with, we create what's called rolling recruitment. We match our recruitment needs with current talent assessment, like looking forwards, are the people that we have on our team, are they the right people for the next 2 or 3 years? Because the truth is, there's nothing more miserable for, you know, the team and for the person if they actually don't want to be there, you know, and if you're not addressing this. And the reality and the truth is, and you know this, if you look at a sports team, it's very rare that the 100% exact same players continue year on year on year to go up the leagues. And why is that? Because some of them don't want to. You know, the higher you go, the more you've got to grow, the harder it is, the more training you've got to do, etc., etc. So not everybody wants it, not everybody's got the talent for it, but the key is that you have to always be looking for your next piece of talent. And I just saw in the news that you know, Leicester City are pushing for their next player to sign a contract because they don't want to lose that person to another team. And imagine if you were to forward plan and take on that same mindset that a sports team, a Premier League sports team would take, you know, and not leave it too late, so that you either have an empty seat, which, by the way, usually an empty seat's better than a seat with a wrong person in a business perspective. And also, the other thing is you could take the best of what you've got, which again isn't great. So that's mistake number 2. Mistake number 3 is lack of robust hiring process. And this is the biggest one. I mean, I want you to think about the army. Like the army, to get into the army, oh my God, you have to absolutely jump through hoops. And, you know, I have a hiring process, which again means that people have to jump through hoops to get a job with you, because, you know, you deserve to know who is going to come on your team. You deserve to know whether they've got the capabilities, and you can't find that out in a, you know, 1-hour interview. I mean, think about this. It's like a decision to marry somebody. Like, you're bringing them into your business. It's like you're bringing them into your home. And, you know, you've got to really know that person. Have they got the capability? And it starts off with really understanding what you're hiring for. What's the position? Where does it fit in the organizational structure? Where does it fit on your functional accountability chart? Because again, I see a mistake. If you haven't got that process, one of the biggest mistakes is not being clear on what you're hiring for, and also not being clear on what that person that you're going to hire looks like, the absolute detail of them. You know, what skills do they need to have? What experience do they need to have? What qualifications do they need to have? What outcomes do you want them to give you in that role? You know, how are you going to measure them being successful for you? If you're not clear on that, how do you know you've got the right person in front of you? And unfortunately, most people don't pick up enough red flags in the interviewing process, and can miss some stuff, or worse than that, ignore some stuff that actually you probably were hearing in the process, but you were either a little bit willfully blind to, or you thought, oh, well, it won't be important. But if you look back at any, you know, what I would say reflectively bad hires, how many of those people could you have spotted that at interview? Like, really do listen to your gut. So the next poll is coming up, which is, how big a price do you think you're paying currently for, you know, your people decision mistakes, either leaving things too late, you know, hiring the wrong people? So it looks like most of you are resonating with some of the things that I shared there, possibly more than, like I said, I couldn't believe it first when someone said to me it's like 5 times salary, particularly with salespeople. You know, if you're hiring someone to take on a sales role for you, and you want them to bring you in, I don't know, £500,000, £1 million worth of business in a year, if they're a mishire, you don't get that year back. You don't get that year back to get the money, you know, in the business. And worse than that is, you might have had to operationally set up to deliver what that salesperson was expected to sell. So, you know, and again, there can be a bigger erosion there because of that. Thank you. So let's end that one. So 26.8. So basically, everybody can see that there's something to be done. And again, interesting, kind of 80-20, isn't it? Again, very interesting. So you'll notice I get curious about data. And one of the reasons for that is because data helps you make good decisions. You know, I really appreciate you sharing today, because that, you know, that information you're sharing with me, we're going to talk strategy in a moment, but that helps to inform my strategy. So there's a big trend at the moment, and you might be working on this yourself, about checking in and making sure your people are engaged, and, you know, making sure that you're retaining. So one thing I'm going to say to you is, make sure that you are really measuring your engagement and retention on the people you actually want engaged and retained. Because, you know, if you've got a bunch of what I call, you know, B or C, certainly C players who are engaged, then that's not great. And if your A players are not engaged, that's really not good. So one of the things that I would say is, and there's a few slides to follow here, is how you keep your A talent. First off is hire them smart to start with, hire great people, and make sure you don't get in their way. And it's so easy to do, especially as, you know, if it's your own company and you are, you know, you're growing it, you're used to being in control of everything. And it's learning how to, when you do have great people, it's learning how to come from that place of trust. And that doesn't mean, you know, there's a fine line between trusting and abdicating, but there's also, it's very easy to get in people's way. So it's very demotivating. So there's this very simple thing you can do here. You can just do a quick pulse with all your people. What did I do? What am I doing? What are my behaviors? What do I do that actually demotivates you? That's one thing, how you're going to retain your A talent. The next thing is, you know, here's a reality, is you want to 10x your business and you've got to 10x your people. And it really is about, can your existing people grow fast enough to deliver on your goals? And, you know, A player talent likes to grow. It likes to be stretched. And, you know, again, I've worked in companies where the leader does a lot of reading and learning and is a little bit frightened to, you know, kind of cascade that down the company. They very much are an A player. But what you will find is, the more that you stretch people, your A talent will rise up, and the rest, you'll kind of know where you stand, and you'll start to get a clearer picture of the talent you've actually really got. It really is, as I look back over my last 15 years, the real predictor of success is how you are as a leader. You know, it is all, your company is a reflection, or your leadership team is a reflection of you, and the rest of the company is a reflection of your leadership team. So it's, where is your mindset around, you know, the way that you lead? I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni. He wrote 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I like the way he writes. He writes fables, which are nice and digestible. But he's written a great book called The Motive. It's like, what's your motive as a leader? And those leaders that I see really get the best from their people and make the biggest strides forward are those that realize actually their people aren't there to just do as they're told. You know, the old days, it was, you know, my dad was a little bit like this, bless him. You know, it was like my way or the highway. This is what you do. He told people what to do and how to do it, literally every single thing. And essentially, he didn't realize that, you know, if you liberated people, you get the best out of them. So I believe that the best leaders are those leaders who realize they're there to serve people. They're there to add value to the people. They're there to leave them better than the day that they arrived. So, you know, I love Jim Rohn. I don't know if you've heard of him, who's, you know, one of the greatest philosophers in my mind. And, you know, I took this with me from leaving the business and becoming a coach. Like, don't wish it were easier. Don't wish your life were easier. Wish you were better, and work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Because, you know, if you work hard on your job, you'll make a living. But if you work hard on yourself, you'll make a fortune. And that's not just about money either. You know, there's many different rewards. So 80-20, again, playing in. And I say learn. Knowledge is power. Those teams and those companies that have a really strong culture of learning and reflection, because it isn't just about learning, it's also about, you get your learning. So I say you've got knowledge, and you can get knowledge in lots of places. You know, today is an example of getting some knowledge, reading a book, listening to something on Audible. You know, that's getting knowledge. But I think also when you put it into practice and then reflect, that's where you get context. And that's where wisdom comes from, because if you can see what's playing out every day, and if you can reflect, you know, and I recommend different types of reflections at different times. You know, there's a quick fire daily reflection where you can say, okay, what was good about my day? You know, what do I want to leave behind, not take with me? And, you know, tomorrow, what do I want to make better? What can I learn from what happened today? So I'm a big believer in reflection. It requires you to slow down. And that's difficult. You know, if you're running a business, fast paced, you're in it, you're kind of in the daily groove, if you like. It's like nearly counterintuitive to slow down. But if you don't, you won't get the reflections that will then actually make the changes. You won't see actually what's happening. You won't get the moments to, in effect, diagnose what your issues are. You'll be treating symptoms over and over and over again. So with that in mind, here's another poll. So, does your company have a strong culture of learning, development, and coaching of your people? So for those of you who think you're too busy, then I really just encourage you, start with something. Everybody's busy. Book summaries, because part of knowledge gives you power, and that power can help you change your situation so you do have time. It's kind of chicken and egg. It's difficult. Cool. Thank you. So again, a little bit kind of 80-20. 20% don't have the time. 80% do. Some learning, some could do more. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So now we move on to strategy. So we got our people right to get our strategy right. So you could ask 100 business people, what is strategy? And I think it's one of the most, you know, overused and maybe misunderstood words. So for the purpose of this conversation, I like to use Michael Porter's definition, which is that your strategy is the creation of a unique and valuable place in the market with and this is the kicker, with a differentiated set of activities. So essentially it's kind of where we're going to play the game, and it's the how we're going to win, because most marketplaces are fairly crowded. It's not like, you know, you enter a new market and suddenly you got no competition. So the best you can do is to go, right, how do I call it finding your white space? How do we find that place in the market where maybe it's underserved, and it's usually around not necessarily what you're doing, but it's often around who you do it for. So the heart of strategy is understanding who you're serving. And then it's making sure that you are providing them the services. So first of all, you've got the demographic of who you're serving. It could be a type of company in a certain marketplace. Then you've got what really matters to them. Like, what do they need from you? If you looked at what your competencies are as a company, what your strengths are, what your capabilities are, and some of you know during COVID, you've pivoted, you've taken your competencies, and you've, you know, you've started to produce something different because the market took you in that direction. You could see the opportunity. Once you know who you're going to serve, it's then about what really matters to them, you know, because you cannot be all things to all men. There's a great book called Uncommon Service, which talks about, like, you've got to make some tough decisions, because if you try and serve everybody and be all things to all men, you become literally, you know, not enough to everybody. So linked to this, really linked to this, is your strategy process and your innovation process. And I see these as two separate things. So you will have innovation, which tends to be looking at the products and services you do. They're innovating. And then you have your strategy process. And you see here, I've said strategy is not something that's done once a year at a retreat. You know, and I hear people go, oh, you know, we're doing our annual strategic planning. So I call that execution planning. In my mind, strategy is something particularly the way the world's going at the moment, that is a constant ongoing process. You know, meeting regularly, a strategic team, and you can involve outsiders, you know, meeting regularly, then talking to your innovation people to say, this is what the market's telling us. And it needs to be outwardly focused. It needs to be based on either what the market's telling you, what your customers are telling you. Whereas what I mostly see in high growth scale ups is a lot of internal focus, and then there's a glass ceiling that gets hit, because suddenly it's like, why didn't these people get that, you know, what we've got is the best product in the world? And, you know, my question is, are you communicating this correctly to them? So if you don't understand what their needs are, you won't be able to message to those needs. So, and the other thing is, you know, before you go out and you invest in a new product or a new service, Jim Collins talks about firing bullets, not cannonballs. So go do a minimum viable product. And then the best strategies are created in what I call a co-creation model. This is our document, the 7 strata of strategy. Say that a few times when you've had a glass of wine, that's not easy. And a really, really good framework of a book to support this is called The Inside Advantage. It's written by Bob Bloom, ran a big advertising agency in New York. And essentially it will help you really define who your core customer is. And that's the very person that buys from you. We're not talking about the company, we're talking about the buyer and their emotional needs and wants, why it is that they buy. Because people buy an emotion, they don't buy logically. You might think you buy logically, but actually somewhere along the line, usually it's an emotionally driven decision. Once you know that, you can set your business up to make promises that really matter to your customer. And more than that, you can really focus then on internally on the 3 to 5 differentiating activities. And I'm going to show you in a moment some examples of what I mean by that matter to the customer. And you might think to yourself about, what brands do you really trust? Like, what brands in the marketplace are you loyal to that you go back to again and again and again? And I'm going to speak to you for a minute about Apple. And, you know, you might not be a lover of Apple, and it kind of doesn't matter, because what that's saying to me is Apple don't serve your needs. If you're not a lover, then you are not one of Apple's core customers. And this is the point to strategy, is when you make a decision of deciding who you're going to target for, you gear your business around it. And I'm, as a customer of Apple's, looking in and going, I don't know what their differentiating activities are, but if I was to guess what they were, I would say this is behind their strategy, is that they've created stores that are more like destinations. They're places to be, like they're pretty cool to be in there. You know, people hang out in there. They do all sorts of things, like they give free training and stuff, so that they encourage people to be in the environment. They also have a very small range of products. They're small, they're prestigious, they're aspirational, and basically, you know, what does that allow? It allows them to train people, train their technicians, and they can be experts because they haven't got 150 different products to be having to be experts on. So customer service as well. They are the best, in my experience anyway, the best at customer service in terms of consistency. Do I get occasional bad service? Very occasionally, but that's going to happen. They have an ecosystem. It's sticky. I don't want to get out of it. Unlike, you know, BlackBerry that had people feeling trapped. I don't feel trapped. Some people felt trapped in Apple and they left, but that's again because you didn't fit the core customer of Apple. And lastly, newly, because they see it's aspirational and they want to open the market up, they've now made it really easy to buy. So, you know, there's finance options, trade-in options, and, you know, they just make it easy. So Apple have a very clear strategy. It allows them to have their innovation work. Their marketing creates their brand loyalty. You know, if you were thinking about your business now, if you had your strategy lined up, it would make lead generation easy because marketing would know what the messages were that needed to be transferred, and sales conversion would go up because you'd be taking the right things to the right customers. You would have been finding out how they would buy them. Operationally, you become a well-oiled machine because you know what you're going to deliver. It's not all sorts of different things. And financially, that's going to result in something strong for you. So another pulse test is, do you believe you found your white space? Have you found your unique, valuable position that allows you to have the whole business working in alignment and real easy? So 50%, so it's like another 80% of getting close or yes, and like, well, 17%. So yeah, interesting. So again, so what could I recommend you would be wanting to read? There's a great book called The 3 Hag Way. If you want to get more into your strategy, that's really good learning as well. You know, take the 7 strata document as well, start to work away at that. And I really recommend that you look at the Inside Advantage, because again, that will really help you with your core customer. So they would be what I call really good resources to support your strategy creation. But the most important thing is take time out. So execution, look at that. Right people doing the right things. So how do they do that? How do they do a pit stop and a wheel change in 2 point something, less than 3 seconds? Absolutely phenomenal. And like, what's your equivalent? So in business, you have people who have got daily responsibilities they've to meet. They've got KPIs. They've got executional, you know, work on your strategy that needs to be done, you know, or that's what you would have them needing to do if you had all your things in place. But in the meantime, the question is, do you find yourself frustrated? Do you find yourself getting in the middle and get dragged into issues? Do you find that customers aren't getting the right experience? You know, is there that sort of, you set targets and you don't always get them met, and, you know, you can just see where you're leaking profit and cash. So the thing to ask yourself then is, do people really know what's expected? Because if you look at these guys here, do you think this is like the first time they've done this? Because I'm quite sure that they do an awful lot of practicing off the pitch. And that's the thing, you know, not only do your people need to be clear on what you want them to do, but also how. And I don't mean micromanaging them, because that's something very different and it's not helpful, but they do need to know how. Because, you know, if in the days when there was just a few of you, things were done in a certain way, and now they're not being done consistently, as I see it, that is a process issue. And if you haven't got the process in place and your people aren't trained on it, they're just going to do it the way that they do it. And also, if you're not holding the standard, if you've not got strong enough management that both train and also make sure people are accountable, it's just not going to happen. Because the reality is, you can have the best managers on the planet and the best people, but if your team structure's flawed in any way, if your functions are siloed and they're not synchronizing, and your processes aren't working together seamlessly, both for your customer and for your team, you're never going to have that finely tuned engine. So there is again, another scaling up tool, and you will get all these tools. They're going to come on an email to you, which is called the PACE, the Process Accountability Chart. And I've put here on the slide some of the processes that I think are worth attention, and some examples for you. Basically, the exercise is list your processes, number 1. Number 2 is to assign an owner to each process. Number 3 is list the KPIs that you could be measuring to make sure that they're working and you can improve them and make sure that they're constantly being looked at to get better and better and better, because what you don't measure, you can't change. So finally, the last piece is you then need to document and train people on, literally train them on how to do their jobs. You know, again, Apple Store, I asked them, I said, how much training do you get? They get 2 weeks solid classroom training before they are allowed out of the classroom into the store. So, you know, just think about that. how much training do your people get? And is any of this, another poll, is any of this lack of clarity and accountability and training of your core processes causing you inefficiencies? Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So yeah, so it looks like everybody's got room for improvement. And again, you know, there are real hidden costs to not having these things right. And even when you've got them right, there is, you know, I put this slide in because there's no magic wand to make this stuff great. There's no magic wand to make your business great. It takes a combination of discipline of your people, discipline of your thinking, rigorous planning, and then disciplined action. And that's how great things happen. And I'm going to take you back to the one-page plan now, because, you know, we've got our strategy in place. We talked about strategy, but then how do we use the one-page plan? So I thought I'd just bring you back to that and show you that the left-hand side and all of the blue areas of this slide are the areas on the one-page plan here, which is where you put your strategy. And that allows you to be able to have a single document that shows you your long-term as well as the short term. So you'll see there in brown, I'll just move that out of the way. You see there in brown, those are what I call the executional priorities. So you have real clarity over what do we need to get done in the business in the next 12 months? What are the 3 to 5 most important strategic priorities that we need to execute to reach our 3-year vision and goals? And then on the right-hand page there is, what do we need to do in the next 90 days? So we also use, within strategy, we'd use SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, and trends. But within execution planning, we'd use SWOT. So every quarter, you would use the SWOT tool, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that would inform you of what needed to get done to take you 1 quarter towards achieving your 12-month strategic objectives. But then what do you do with it then? Because, you know, one thing that Vern Harnish says is the bottleneck is at the top of the bottle always. And in a business, it's absolutely no different. It's always the leadership that bottleneck. So what's the solution? I want you to just imagine this for a moment. You've now got a very clear strategy. It's clearly documented. You've got people at owning company priorities to execute that 3-year strategy, which you will be constantly revisiting to validate. But you go away in your first quarter to do some of the execution and you cascade it down the business. Can you imagine a world where every single person in the business has a 1-pager with their measurement of success, like how they're going to be measured? And by the way, A players want this. They want to know every day, are they winning or are they losing? And they've got objectives that they're working on that are working towards your strategic objectives as well. You know, it's so incredibly powerful. So that's how you take it and you use the scale up framework to cascade your strategy right down into like everyday world. And that means that, you know, you need to have visibility. You need to have visibility of the metrics, because if you don't measure it, you are not going to be able to change it. And, you know, if you think about performance within a Formula One race, performance of the car, the driver, the people on the team, like races literally are won by small fractions. And kind of your business is no different. And we're going to look at some compounded some compounded effects of metrics in a moment. But essentially, the key is rhythm. And all of these things need to be executed within a meeting rhythm. And the scaling up meeting rhythm is a combination of, I've put at the bottom, strategy meetings. They're separate to your planning meetings. They're where you step back, you have your strategic council meetings, you talk blue sky, you talk big picture, you talk about the marketplace, You talk about the problems that you could solve with the competencies and the products that you have. And you'd meet weekly or bi-weekly as a strategic team. You'd feed it back into your leadership team on a monthly basis. And then from an executional perspective, best practice would be to meet once a year to forge your annual plans, which again, I recommend you start that process along with a budgeting process that starts probably about 3 or 4 months before the start of your new year. And then once you've hit your new year, plan for your new quarter, execute and review. Get your learnings, plan, execute, review, and get into a rhythm. And then on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, you'll be looking, how are we going? And this is real tactical, moving things along, making sure we're executing. And the daily meetings, well, they're all about making sure we've no bottlenecks. Let's flush them out quickly. And finally, and very importantly, one-to-ones where you're actually working with people and developing them. So that's your execution decisions. And we're going to move on to cash now. And we're doing all right. We're doing good on time because my goodness, I've just looked at my watch and that says 11:45 and it is 11:45. So cash is your fuel. Literally, cash is the fuel that goes in your car. And just like a Formula One car uses quite a lot of fuel to get around the track, well, so does growth. Growth literally can suck cash out of a business. And, you know, people don't realize, and I often meet people, as I said earlier, who've maybe hit that brick wall. You know, 10 million, the 10 million mark's quite a common brick wall or glass ceiling to hit. And what happens then, what I find is the level of ambition comes down. So maybe rather than wanting to punch as high as maybe they would have done 3 or 4 years ago before they hit these problems, they start to shrink back down and go, do you know what, if I could just get to maybe, you know, 15 million by the next, I don't know, 3 years, I'd be like really pleased with that. But here's the problem. Often the problems that have got you to reach your glass ceiling are going to require some kind of serious, significant investment to actually take you through that and over it. You know, it might be your processes weren't scalable, your marketing wasn't robust enough, and there's going to be some investment needed. It might be new product, it might be something operational, but whatever it is, might be a significant amount of investment required, might be some people changes. So, you know, again, let's go back to basics, is we're always looking for a return on investment. And, you know, so I want to just go back to thinking about your vision and, you know, your appetite, whether you're playing to win or not to lose, because again, the cash sucks your growth. Sorry, growth sucks your cash. So really look forward and think about how much investment is going to be required, because I like to generate cash from within a company. Like the more you can generate internally, the more, like, my goal is people not be in debt unless it makes real sense, or unless, you know, it's a startup that is really being built around a strategy of, you know, I'm going to say non-organic growth, where you are using that cash to accelerate your growth. However, if you are at the moment in a what I would call the regular position, you aren't externally funded, or you are, and it's really important that you maximize your cash runway, this is a great exercise to do. Again, you're going to get this tool, but it's called our Cash Accelerator. And I recommend that you take this out either monthly or minimum quarterly and work it as a team exercise. There's different sections here, but fundamentally, you're looking at, number one is, how can we speed up the process from spending £1 to the £1 coming back into the business? How do we make it maybe easier for, these are examples, make it easier for somebody to buy? Maybe we can raise the invoice faster. The second area is, how can we eliminate some of the mistakes that are getting made that are actually, you know, stalling the cash from being in our bank account, you know? And it might be about making sure that we haven't got any errors going on in our invoicing. It's looking at what are the mistakes that get made that do stall the cash coming into our bank. Maybe we didn't order the things correctly. You know, I worked with a company once who didn't have very good ordering in place, and they kept ordering the wrong things that both upset the customers and also meant it took longer for the customer to pay them. And finally, it's looking at your business model as well. Are there any strategic changes we can make to our business model that actually mean we're going to get more cash up front? You know, a monthly recurring revenue that will support our overheads. You know, it's just looking at your same situation, but through a different lens. And there's nobody better to do that than the people on the ground on your teams. So I'd make that a regular exercise. And I want to share this with you. We've got 10 minutes left. So I'm actually going to share this one with you. I don't know if any of you have heard of this before, but it's called The Power of One. There is a book that's written about this called Cash Flow Story, which goes much more in depth. And I'm actually going to change my screen so that I can show you the real life version of how this works. Pippa, can you just confirm that this spreadsheet is visible?
Yes.
To everybody?
Yes, it should be. I can see it.
Okay, super. So this is a simple spreadsheet, and I just want to show you the magic here behind the compounded effect of small incremental changes across different key numbers in your business. So this is a real life set of numbers that was supplied to me from a client who I started working with just over a year ago. And I asked them the question. I said, from a price tolerance perspective, how much do you dare put your prices up before you think you will start to lose sales? And she wasn't really sure. So she said, I'll start and I'll measure it, and I'll just see what the tolerance level was. And when they'd done, it worked out, it was 7%. So they had that tolerance. So are you all seeing this? So by putting the prices up, doing nothing more than putting the prices up, they got £674,000 more cash and 679,000 more profit. Then we looked at volume, and we thought to ourselves, okay, so what kind of growth do you think that we could go for? And we looked at their marketing, we looked at the way that they generated business, and they reckoned that it would be, you know, reasonable given previous performance that they could expect and shoot for 20% growth. So that's what we shot for, and we shot for a strategy that would match that 20% growth. And then we looked at cost of goods reduction. They reckoned that they'd got that nailed. They didn't reckon that they could reduce their overheads. Their overheads were all pretty fixed, but equally they didn't believe they had to increase any either. We looked at their debtor days and their creditor days and decided we wanted to leave those just as they were. But they did look at the buying, and they thought, you know what, we could possibly look at that, and maybe even if we just looked at reducing that by maybe 3 days, what would that give us? So without doing anything too onerous, that was the difference based on their forecasting. But the reality of what happened, interestingly enough, was COVID came along and their business actually doubled. And within their confidence during that, they put their prices up even more. Now, that's basically their reality of a year. Now, that bears no connection to your business, but your business can and will operate under similar, what I would call principles. And if you can intentionally use this, and you'll use it in different ways, if you can really intentionally use this, you'll find that you'll be able to have some really significant gains that you haven't thought about. So that's the first thing I'm sharing with you. So that's the power of the compounded effect. And the second thing I'm going to show you is if you can identify, in a second, if you can identify, and I've already populated this just to show you something. If you can identify, this was an optician's, we identified the levers that if we focused on increasing, so for him, it was eye examinations, the conversion from the eye examination to the dispense, the average value of, the average number of pairs that were dispensed. So like, you know, you could sell a pair, one pair and have a spare pair, or you could sell a pair of sunglasses, for example. You know, we worked on raising that, and the average value sale of the lens and of the frame. So we started here. This was our start point. So in this particular practice, originally it had the capacity for 40 tests. And that was based on the fact that they had one optometrist who could do 8 eye examinations in a day. Now, they had 2 testing rooms. So we looked at, okay, so what if we opened up the second testing room? That would actually mean that we could, if we just shot for 76 tests per week, and this is a target, it took them about a year to get to it. If we can look at raising the conversion rate, if we can look at raising the dispense amounts and the number of pairs dispensed, by raising the average dispense to 431 by 350 from 356, this was the result. The weekly revenue went up like more than double. You know, if you look at it, it's 148% growth. Now, was there extra cost involved? Yes, there was. There was some room set up, which I haven't put in here, but there was like what I would call year 1 extra cost, of which some, but not all of that went into year 2. But you would swap that, wouldn't you? You would swap that investment for another 569,000 top line growth, which is it's a good gross margin as well in that industry. So again, those numbers don't necessarily resonate with what your KPIs would be, but it's again, the principle that I wanted to share with you is if you can find 4 or 5 levers, 4 or 5 KPIs that really work for you, then you will have that ability to get that compounded effect in your business. So this was a guy that I worked with, Royston Bayfield. He started off, he was one of my first clients actually, I was 2-3 years in as a coach. And Royston has now got a national brand. I think he's up to 19 practices now, and he's taken that model forward to leverage, and it's helped him also identify practices. So yeah, I am done, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you to Hayley. Very fascinating, enlightening webinar, some great tools there. I hope you found it very enjoyable and useful. We're finalising details of our next event. We'll be in touch soon. I hope to see you there again. Thank you.